Welcome. Welcome, weary football pilgrims, to lower leagues. Tonight, our focus turns to a titan of ambition, a dragon with a football at its feet. Yet, one that's found the global pitch a rather slippery surface for its considerable talents. We're looking at the curious case of Chinese football. Now, China, they've got this. Dream a proper big spelled out by President Xi Jinping himself by 2050. The plan is to qualify for another FIFA World Cup, host one, and then, the cherry on top, win the blooming thing. Simple as that. Nothing like aiming high, eh? Especially when you hear it's all part of a grander national rejuvenation agenda. This football lark positioning the game as a central field for institutional change and political steering. Sounds relaxing. Almost makes you want a nap just thinking about the paperwork. But here's the rub. As they say, the current state of affairs, it's a bit sobering, the national team's performance. Well, let's just say it's consistently poor. Take the 2025 season for international friendlies. Played 10, won 2, drew 1, lost 7, at 20% win rate. Not exactly striking fear into the hearts of Brazil or Germany, is it? More like a gentle nudge, if that. They're averaging about 0.7 goals a match, but letting in over 2 significant defensive vulnerabilities. The official reports call it leaving the back door wide open, while the milkman's whistling for his money and the dogs run off with the Sunday joint. Their prediction risk is deemed very high risk at 120%. I'm not betting man, but I know which way I wouldn't be pointing my tenor. Their only appearance in the FIFA World Cup finals was way back in 2002, where they lost all 3 group games. And the recent World Cup qualifying campaigns, still a bit of a struggle, like trying to get decent cup of tea south of Sheffield. A 2-0 loss to Australia highlighted the competitive gap. Aye, a gap big enough to drive a tea clipper through, with room for the dragon dance on deck and a brass band playing a rather mournful tune. So, why are we calling this a Lower Leagues episode? Because the problems, you see, they're not just with the fancy lads at the top or polished boots and sponsorship deals. Oh no. The root causes of China's struggles lie not solely at the elite national team or top-tier club level, but within the fundamental structures and development pathways. These foundational issues, particularly at the grassroots and lower professional tiers, are paramount to understanding why China has yet to fulfill its footballing potential. The roots of this struggle, they run deep, right down into the foundations, the grassroots, the bits that are supposed to hold the whole blinking thing up. And that, my friends, is where the interesting and often perplexing stories usually lie. The unfulfilled potential, and perhaps why a football dream, for now, remains just that, a dream. Now, before we get bogged down in the spreadsheets, the 5-year plans and the modern league tables, it's probably worth remembering something rather important. When it comes to kicking a ball around for a bit of sport, China wasn't exactly a latecomer to the party. Oh no. In fact, you could say they were practically hosting the original warm-up. Football historians, and indeed FIFA itself, if you look through their own historical records, often point to an ancient Chinese game called kaju as one of the very earliest forms of football. We're talking a long, long time ago. Some say it dates back to the Han Dynasty, that's over 2,000 years back, though others reckon its roots go even deeper. Makes your average 100-year-old football league club look like a mere toddler, doesn't it? Now Kuja, as ancient texts and depictions suggest, wasn't quite a Premier League match with VAR and millionaire players. It involved kicking a leather ball often filled with feathers or animal hair through an opening into a net, sometimes with a fair bit of skill and acrobatics involved. It was used for military fitness training, for recreation, and was apparently popular with everyone from emperors down to the common folk. There were even professional Kuju players back in the day, believe it or not, in different versions of the game. Some with goals, some without, some emphasizing teamwork, others individual skill. So when you think about China's modern struggles to make a mark on the global football stage, there's a rather poignant irony, isn't there? A nation that played a game remarkably like football centuries before it even began to codify in places like England, now finding it such a tough nut to crack. It just goes to show, perhaps, that having ancient roots is one thing, but cultivating a thriving modern footballing ecosystem, well, that's a whole different ballgame, isn't it? One that requires more than just a long history. It requires, well, all the things we're about to delve into. We begin, as all good stories should, at the very beginning of the modern tale, or at least the beginning of trying to get the professionals properly organized at the beginning, but on paper looked full of Eastern promise, even if the beautiful game itself sometimes seemed to stumble over the first oddly placed hurdle, or perhaps a hastily translated rulebook. So settle in. Let's delve into the annals, the ledgers, and the downright curious case of how Chinese football tried to get its boots on, and occasionally on the right feet.
Come 2004, the Jia, a league got a rebrand. A new lick of paint, a bit of spit and polish. It became the Chinese Super League. The CSL sounds impressive, doesn't it? Super League. Like something out of a comic book, or at least a very hopeful PowerPoint presentation. And its stated objectives included promoting high-quality competition, introducing advanced managerial concepts, enforcing professionalism, and of course, attracting elite foreign coaches and players. You know, the full Christmas list for any aspiring league with a few quid to spend and a glossy brochure to produce. But bless its cotton socks, the inaugural season didn't exactly get off to a flyer. It was, as they say in the more unfortunate press releases, marred by controversies, including match-fixing and gambling scandals that had plagued its predecessor. The Geo League, since 1999. Off to a flyer. Then you couldn't make it up, could you? Well, clearly someone did. Then came the Kutu who did it, the money. The money. Oh, the money. It wasn't so much a gentle trickle as a blooming gold rush. A proper deluge of cash that made your eyes water. Clubs engaged in lavish spending, attracting a host of high-profile foreign players. There was Paulinho, Hulk, Oscar. Not the little gold statues you get for acting the Brazilian playmaker with a wand of a foot. Carlos Tevez and Jackson Martinez. And the managers, renowned coaches like Marcelo Lippi, Luis Felipe Scolari, and Sven-Göran Eriksson, proper household names. Some of them. Probably wondering how their agent had swung this gig and whether the air miles were any good. Why, in the 2016-17 transfer window, they splashed out around $400 million on players. Outspending even the English Premier League for a spell. Imagine that, more brass than the Prem for one brief dizzying. Are they printing money, or did someone leave the national mint open? moment. This financial surge was directly aligned with President Xi Jinping's ambitious vision of transforming China into a football superpower. If you can't breed them, buy them, and hope no one checks the sell-by date or the actual cost, seemed to be the motto for a while there. But here's the thing about gold rushes, especially ones built on borrowed time, or in this case, borrowed yuan from companies that probably had other things to worry about. They tend to be a bit unsustainable. This era of massive capital injection proved inherently so. The CFA, to its credit, and perhaps after a few frantic phone calls, eventually twigged that things were getting a bit out of hand, like a party where someone's just put the prize racehorse on the company credit card. Recognizing the spiraling spending, it introduced regulatory measures, including a luxury tax and salary caps. A bit like shutting the stable door after the prize stallion has not only bolted but also opened a Swiss bank account and is demanding a transfer to Real Madrid. But a critical vulnerability, the Achilles heel of this whole glittering, teetering edifice, was its heavy reliance on real estate enterprises. These property developers owned 10 out of 16 CSL clubs in 2020. And when China's wider real estate sector experienced a slowdown starting in 2019, that artificial financial support for football began to collapse.
The dominoes began to tumble, one after another, with a rather depressing clack that echoed through the empty luxury boxes. This economic downturn led to severe financial difficulties for clubs, resulting in debt, defaults, player sales, and even outright dissolution. Poof. Gone like a pie at a player's Christmas party, or a politician's promise. Guangzhou FC, an 8-time CSL champion and 2-time AFC Champions League winner, was notably refused permission to play professionally due to substantial debt. And Jiangsu FC, the 2020 CSL champion, folded in 2020 wool due to insolvency. Imagine that, champions one year, gone the next, like winning either FA Cup and then your ground gets turned into a luxury apartment complex. You can't afford to live in the ripple effects of this financial crisis extended beyond the pitch, impacting local businesses that thrived on matchday crowds and leading to the closure of youth academies, thereby disrupting clear pathways for aspiring young players, proper lower league behavior that only writ large with more zeros on the end of the debts. The CSL's gold rush was a speculative investment, primarily from real estate driven by political objectives rather than organic market growth. The lack of sustainable revenue models meant clubs were perpetually dependent on owner injections, making them highly vulnerable to external economic shocks. The Chinese football dream, it seems, had been built on an unstable financial foundation, about as solid as a promise from a departing club chairman or a chocolate teapot. You can throw all the money in the world at something, but if you don't build it right from the foundations up with ways to actually earn its keep, like a proper football club should, well, it's just a boom waiting for the bust, and the bust, when it came, was rather spectacular, and not in a good way, like a firework display that sets fire to the shed. 2. Tuan Li. The structure of Chinese professional football, CSL, League 1 and League 2. So this Chinese professional football setup, it's laid out like a pyramid, as most of them, at least in theory. The Chinese professional football league system operates as a pyramid, with the Chinese Super League at its apex, followed by China League 1 as the second highest tier, and China League 2 as the third, CSL, League 1, League 2. Sounds neat and tidy, doesn't it? Like it all fits together. And just like you'd expect from a proper league system, there's a standard promotion and relegation mechanism connecting these divisions. The top 2 teams from League 1 earn promotion to the CSL, and the bottom 2 CSL teams face the dreaded drop. Similar mechanisms link League 1 and League 2, keeps things interesting, or at least that's the theory. Stops teams from just coasting allegedly. But here's where it gets a bit lower leagues. If you catch my drift, and I mean that in the truest sense, the challenges faced by clubs in these lower divisions are particularly indicative of the systemic health of Chinese football financial instability. Oh, it's not just a problem. It's practically a club mascot for many of them, a pervasive issue. League 1 clubs especially often find themselves operating with piggy banks, struggling with significant limitations compared to their CSL counterparts, leading to uneven competition. Doesn't exactly make for a level playing field, does it? More like a ski slope with some folks having much better skis, and those financial woes that afflicted CSL clubs, often owned by property developers, have cascaded throughout the entire pyramid. Club dissolutions due to unpaid wages and debts. That's hit all the tiers, right down the pyramid. Vanishing quicker than a meat pie at halftime, China League 1 also suffers from a notable lack of international recognition. It's a tough sell trying to attract foreign players, decent coaches, or even a bit of sponsorship when nobody outside the immediate vicinity, or perhaps even within it, has really heard of you. Limits your growth potential, doesn't it? And all this financial shakiness, this absence of clear, stable career pathways, well, it means keeping hold of any decent talent in the lower leagues is like trying to catch smoke with a sieve, contributing significantly to talent retention issues within the lower leagues.
The struggles of these lower leagues serve as a barometer of the entire system's health. The financial instability and the lack of recognition are more pronounced in League 1 and League 2, directly reflecting systemic vulnerabilities and unsustainable practices originating from the top. If your base is weak, if the roots aren't healthy, the whole blinking tree is liable to topple. A weak foundation prevents the entire structure from rising. It's not rocket science, is it? Just basic common sense. Now, in a nod to these deep-rooted issues, the Chinese Professional Football League, the CFL, was officially launched in January 2025, a new broom perhaps. This initiative aims to separate the management and operation of professional football from the CFA. The stated goal is to generate more revenue for clubs and fostering greater fairness, transparency, and efficiency throughout the domestic game. A structural reform, they call it, which, if nothing else, shows they know the problems are serious and need more than just a bit of tinker around the edges or another glossy 5-year plan. The structural reform acknowledges that the problems are deeply rooted and require fundamental changes to governance and financial models. We shall see. We shall see. Systemic impediments to China's football power status 3.1 pervasive corruption and governance failures. Larita, China's struggle to become a footballing powerhouse stems from a complex interplay of deep-seated systemic issues that extend beyond mere on-field performance. And first up on our rather gloomy list of why it all went a bit pear-shaped is something that casts a long, dark shadow over Chinese football. Pervasive corruption, and let's be frank, a right mess in the governance department. Now, this isn't just a recent niggle, a bit of bad press. Oh no, Chinese football has been plagued by a long and persistent history of corruption scandals involving match fixing and gambling, the sort of stuff that makes your average fan want to chuck his season ticket in the bin, have been uncovered since as early as 1999, been popping up like unwelcome weeds in a badly kept penalty area. And it's not like they've managed to get a proper handle on it despite the stern talk and the occasional crackdown. This issue remains deeply entrenched as evidence there was a comprehensive 2-year probe concluding in 2024. And what it dug up was, well, pretty grim widespread online gambling, match fixing and bribery cases across 120 matches. 120 implicated Wentite criminal suspects and involved 41 football clubs, 41 clubs. Makes you wonder if anyone was playing it straight. The investigation resulted in severe penalties, including lifetime bans for 40 individuals. That's 38 professional players and 5 club officials among them. And 5-year bans for others. Even high-ranking figures within the sport, the supposed guardians of the game, such as former Chinese Football Association President Chen Zuyan and former national team coach Li Tai have been arrested or sentenced as part of this crackdown. Cleaning house, or trying to, on a scale that suggests the house was more of a pigsty to begin with. Now all this, it does tend to have what you might call a corrosive effect on public trust and the overall integrity of the league. It's also created a significant deterrent for parents, making them hesitant to allow their children to pursue football as a career path. Can you blame them? Who'd want their kids stepping into that sort of murky pond? The structural problem, or at least one of them, seems to lie in the previous CFA setup. It combined multiple roles, regulation, operation, and supervision, all under one rather leaky roof. This led to over-centralization and, critically, inadequate oversight. This concentration of power, well, it created fertile ground for illicit activities, didn't it? Fundamentally undermining any efforts at development by siphoning off resources and compromising fair competition, making it impossible to build a meritocratic system. Makes all those grand ambitions we talked about look a bit shaky, like a goalpost held together with string, and wishful thinking.
A fundamental challenge for Chinese football, a real critical weakness, lies in its youth development system. Now, it doesn't take a footballing genius or even just someone who's managed a Sunday league under 10s side to figure out that if you want a decent national team, you need a steady supply of good young players coming through. It's like baking a cake. You need the right ingredients from the start, not just a fancy tin. But in China, finding those ingredients and then baking them properly, well, that's been a bit of a challenge, to put it mildly. There is a general scarcity of football participation at the grassroots level, and there's a notable insufficiency of young talents progressing to national reserve teams. The conveyor belt, if there even is one, seems to be a bit juddery, and half the parts are missing. Despite increased expenditure on youth football initiatives, significant social barriers persist in recruiting new elite young footballers. They've thrown money at it, to be fair, or at least made a show of it. But there are some pretty hefty social hurdles to overcome when it comes to getting new elite young footballers onto the books, hurdles that a bigger checkbook alone can't clear. A major impediment is the societal perception of football as a hindrance to children's academic education, particularly for those over 13 years old. Especially once they get past their early teens, the pressure cooker of the Chinese education system really ramps up. You see, the demanding training schedules frequently clash with school obligations, and in China's relentlessly competitive education system, where exam results are king, queen, and the entire royal court, many parents will, quite understandably, prioritize academic success. They'll push their kids towards the books rather than the boots. This societal pressure directly contributes to a shortage of elite players beyond early adolescence. The talent pool just shrinks like a cheap replica shirt in a hot wash. Furthermore, the Chinese system traditionally favors identifying and intensively drilling individual talents for medal-winning performances. Think divers, gymnasts, that sort of thing. But football, it's a team game, isn't it? It needs a broad player base and the cultivation of collective team talent. The old approach of polishing one or two diamonds doesn't quite fit when you need 11 of them working together, plus subs. And just to add another layer of, let's call it complexity, or perhaps things that make you shake your head slowly. Historically, age fraud has also been a significant issue in Chinese youth football. Instances discovered where bone ages exceeded claimed biological ages. That sort of shenanigans really erodes trust in the system and disincentivizes genuine talent development, doesn't it? Makes you wonder who you're really watching. Compounding these issues are shortcomings in coaching quality at the grassroots level. There is a recognized difficulty in finding coaches with appropriate skills and knowledge. Many coaches are perceived as overly focused on short-term elite performance rather than holistic player development. And you can hardly blame some of them when you hear about the conditions. Youth football coaches frequently face challenges such as low professional competence, a lack of formal higher education, inadequate theoretical knowledge in sports training, low professional attractiveness, and poor compensation. Pay is often poor, with only 20% reporting satisfaction with their pay. Training systems are often rigid and utilize outdated content, failing to meet diverse learning needs. Not exactly an inviting prospect for a career, is it? This creates a systemic disconnect between China's ambition to be a football superpower and the reality of its foundational youth development. The emphasis on elite performance and quick results, coupled with societal pressures to prioritize academics, leads to a narrow and often compromised talent pool. The poor quality of grassroots coaching further exacerbates this, meaning that even the few players who persist do not receive optimal development. It's a bit of a vicious cycle, really. One that stops enough elite players from emerging to achieve those lofty national footballing aspirations. You can't build a castle on quicksand, no matter how shiny the turrets are meant to be. When you're trying to get good fast, and you've got a bit of cash burning a hole in your pocket, or at least access to someone else's, there's always a tempting shortcut. Bring in the foreigners in China during the Bedtime went for this in a big way, actively pursuing a strategy of importing high-caliber foreign players and coaches. The idea, on paper at least, was to give the whole system a boot up the backside to overhaul its football institutions and infrastructure. The intention was to improve playing standards and, with a bit of luck, inspire the next generation of domestic talent. And for a while it looked like a proper party, didn't it? We saw them arrive, the big names, the marquee signings, World Cup winners, Champions League stars, managers with CVs longer than your arm and probably demanding wages to match the intention they said was good. Elevate the league, get the locals learning from the best, good intentions, often paved with gold-plated contracts and a hefty agent's fee. But this influx, well, it proved to be a bit of a double-edged sword, as these things often are. On one hand, you had the stardust, the fleeting moments of oohs and ahs from the crowd. On the other, the spiraling costs that made your eyes water. Concerns over this runaway spending led the CFA to introduce restrictions on foreign players. For example, limiting clubs to 4 foreign players, with only 3 allowed on the field at a time in 2019, and implement salary caps. These measures, combined with the subsequent financial crises we've already had a gloomy look at, led to the departure of many foreign stars and coaches, and the league's competitive struggles. Well, they just intensified. The boost they provided was temporary. It seemed like a sugar rush before the inevitable nap under the desk. And even when they were there, the foreign coaches, despite all their know-how, their fancy PowerPoint presentations, and their insistence on punctuality, faced significant acculturation challenges. These difficulties stemmed from unfamiliar social environments, differing cultural practices, and limited support networks. Now, communication was a barrier, sure, as you'd expect. But it wasn't the primary issue. A more fundamental problem, apparently, was the challenge of effectively tracking and evaluating large numbers of youth students within the Chinese system. It wasn't what they were used to, like trying to find a needle in a haystack the size of a small European country. Many European coaches ultimately left the country during the COVID-19 pandemic, packing their bags when things got particularly tough, which just highlighted how transient this foreign influence could be. Here today, gone tomorrow, leaving behind a half-finished tactics board and a confused interpreter. So, this grand strategy of importing high-cost foreign players and coaches, it was a shortcut, alright, aiming to elevate the league and inspire local talent. But it didn't quite lead to the promised land. More like a detour down a rather expensive cul-de-sac. The rapid imposition of restrictions and the eventual departure of these foreign elements exposed a fundamental failure. The imported expertise did not sufficiently embed itself or transfer knowledge to create sustainable domestic improvement. The acculturation challenges for coaches and a focus on short-term performance over long-term structural change meant that foreign influence provided only a temporary boost rather than catalyzing deep-seated development. It just goes to show, doesn't it, that without a robust internal system for knowledge transfer and integration, simply chucking money at external talent provides only fleeting benefits.
So, beyond the balance sheets that don't balance, and the boardroom blunders that make you wonder if anyone was actually in charge, there are these socio-cultural and policy factors. The kind of things that bubble away under the surface of everyday life but have a massive impact on what happens or doesn't happen on the football pitch. Take the legacy of the one-child policy, for instance, now. That was a big societal shift, a proper game changer for families. It made choosing a sports career difficult due to the inherent instability of earnings and income professional sport. Let's be honest, it's not always the most stable of incomes, is it? More ups and downs than a fiddler's elbow. And if you've only got one child, one shot at securing the family's future, you might be a bit more cautious about them chasing a pig's bladder for a living, hoping for a lottery win of a contract. This policy may also have fostered a mentality less conducive to team sports, where individuals might be reluctant to take risks or be held solely responsible for defeat. Just a thought, mind. The sort of thing professors write long papers about makes you wonder, though. Then there's the towering importance of education in China. It's a fiercely competitive system, and there's this pervasive societal perception in China that football is a hindrance to children's academic education. So you find a pretty low willingness among parents to encourage their children to pursue football seriously. It's often seen as a distraction, not a proper career path, especially when little Wei or young Mei could be getting top marks in calculus instead. Understandable, in a way, when the stakes for education are so incredibly high. And we've touched on this before, but it bears repeating. The Chinese system traditionally excels at identifying and intensively drilling individual talents for specific achievements and medals. Think divers off the high board, gymnasts on the beam, pure focus, individual glory. It's a model that's brought a lot of success in certain sports, no doubt about it, but football, it's a different beast, isn't it? It needs broad participation and the cultivation of collective team talent. You can't win the World Cup with just one star striker and 10 blokes who are good at their homework. These deeply ingrained socio-cultural and policy factors, well, they act as significant barriers to mass participation in the development of a collective team ethos.
both of which are absolutely crucial for footballing success, and it means the lower leagues suffer directly from this lack of a broad, culturally supported player base as the pipeline of talent is constrained from its very source. It's not just about finding a few good players, it's about nurturing a whole footballing culture, getting the game into the heart of the community. And that, my friends, is a much bigger and trickier kettle of fish entirely. Despite the systemic challenges we've waded through, the story of Chinese football isn't all doom and gloom. Not entirely. China has indeed produced notable individual talents who have achieved significant success, and it's a big but, this individual brilliance, however dazzling, just isn't translating into collective success. The systemic issues are so profound that they often negate the impact of even the most talented players. Still, let's give these lads their due, these sparks of light in a sometimes murky sky. The modern hope. First up, there's a name that always comes to the fore. Wu Lei, he's the all-time top goal scorer for Shanghai Port and holds the record for the most goals in the Chinese Super League. A true prodigy, he became the youngest ever player in the professional league at just 14 years and 7 days. A proper whippersnapper who was initially turned down by one academy for being too small. His talent eventually shone through, especially under his mentor Xu Zhenbao, who once famously called him China's Maradona. After winning the CSL title and Golden Boot in 2018, the first Chinese player to do so since 2007, he made a groundbreaking move to Spain's RCD Espanyol, praised for his clever off-the-ball movements and an explosive speed that could leave defenders looking like they're running in treacle. He silenced the doubters by becoming the first Chinese player to score in La Liga. His debut was reportedly watched by over 40 million people in China. His humble character and dedication won over the Espanyol faithful, who famously carried him from the pitch on their shoulders. Even when Espanyol faced relegation, he spoke of his family's happiness in Barcelona and his wider hope to see Chinese players fighting for their dreams in all divisions across Europe. The General. Then you've got a real trailblazer, a man they called General Fan back in China. Fan Cai alongside Sun Jihai. He was one of the first Chinese internationals to try his luck in the demanding English leagues, joining Crystal Palace in 1998, signed by none other than Terry Venables El Tel himself. He was a proper player, an immensely versatile defender who could play as a commanding centre, half a cultured sweeper, or even as a makeshift striker chipping in with 5 or 6 crucial goals a season. He became a hugely popular cult hero over more than 100 games, even serving as captain. His quality was undeniable. He was named Asian Footballer of the Year in 2001, the same year Palace fans voted him their Player of the Year. A cornerstone of China's 2002 World Cup team, his passion was legendary. He reportedly turned down offers from Liverpool and Newcastle, such was his commitment to playing for the national team. He was a real character too, even getting a comical red card for appearing to push a referee. Something he claimed was just a misunderstanding in the heat of the moment. The son of China, and Fan Ji's mate in that English adventure was the ever-reliable Sun Jihai. He became a cult hero at Manchester City, pulling on the sky blue shirt on the earth at times over 6 seasons. Before his move, he had already won multiple league titles with Chinese powerhouse Dalian Shide, known affectionately as the Son of China. His versatility was a godsend for managers like Kevin Keegan. He could play right back, left back, or centre, half, a real 7 out of 10 every week, as they say. The fans adored him, creating the classic chant, singing aye, aye, yippee, yippee, aye. Sun Jihai's better than Zidane. Now, right, That might be a bit of classic football fan hyperbole, a tongue-in-cheek bit of Mancunian humor, but it shows the immense affection they had for him. He made history as the first East Asian to score in the Premier League and is remembered for one of the most astonishing, logic-defying goal line clearances the league has ever seen. It was the sort of acrobatic effort that makes you jump out of your seat, spill your bovril and ask, how on earth did he do that? A decorated player, Son was inducted in the English Football Hall of Fame in 2015. His UK journey was rounded out with a brief spell at Sheffield United. The stalwart captain. Let's not forget Zheng Zi. His slave name is synonymous with consistency and leadership, a true midfield general. His trophy cabinet is groaning under the weight of 10 Chinese league titles and 2 AFC Champions League trophies with Guangzhou Evergrande. It probably needs its own postcode and a structural engineer named Asian Footballer of the Year in 2013 and Chinese Footballer of the Year multiple times. He also tested himself in Britain. He played for Charlton Athletic, where manager Alan Pardew called him a top-class player, and later at Scottish giants Celtic under Gordon Strachan. He even popped up with a few memorable goals, including a thumper against Newcastle at St James Park. But perhaps his greatest contribution was his incredible service to the Chinese national team. As FIFA once noted, his influence was immense, a leader known for his calmness on the ball. He captained the side for many years, earning over 100 caps through thick, and let's be honest, mostly thin. Can you imagine the air miles on that man? He's seen more airport departure lounges than most airline pilots, all in service of a dream. His dedication continues, as he has since transitioned into coaching.
Oh, Heidong, the big cannon. And then there's a name that, for a long time, was a byword for goals in Chinese football. Hao Heidong. He is China's all-time top goal scorer for the national team, with a remarkable 41 goals at club level. He was the spearhead of a Dalian-shied team that was an absolute powerhouse, winning 6 league titles and 2 FA Cups. Individually, he was crowned the league's top goal scorer 3 times. He was known as Hao Big Cannon, not just for his explosive finishing, but also for his tendency to speak his mind, never suffering fools or questionable refereeing decisions. Gladly, his brief injury-hit spell in England with Sheffield United came late in his career, leaving a tantalizing what-if had he moved to Europe in his prime. But he is remembered as a genuine goal machine and a fiery, compelling character who dominated Asian football for years. So you see, the talent can be there, and it's a recurring theme, this, like a stuck record at a slightly depressing party. A handful of good players, however bright they shine, can't outrun the deeper problems. It's a team game, after all, from the boot room to the boardroom. Honorable mentions: the pioneers. Jia Sequan. Now, before we move on, it's only right we tip our caps to a few other notable figures from an earlier era. There was Jia Sequan, a commanding central defender and national captain through the 80s, known as Iron Jia for his tough, reliable style as a sweeper. He was a key part of the team that reached the 1988 Seoul Olympics. His quality was undeniable. He was the first Chinese player to be named AFC Player of the Year in 1984. He was also a true pioneer abroad, taking the brave step to play professionally in Japan for Gambo Osaka, where his experience and leadership were highly valued at a time when very few Chinese players ventured overseas. Rong Zixing. And there's a name that echoes with reverence: Rong Zixing. His incredible technical skill and attacking flair in the 70s and 80s earned him the remarkable nickname the Chinese Pele. That tag wasn't just about scoring goals, but about his overall technique, his dribbling ability, and the way he could influence a game. He was the heart and soul of the national team, a playmaker who could unlock any defense and who shone brightly during the qualifying campaign
for the 1982 World Cup. Playing his club football for teams like Guangzhou Army, his impact was such that he was voted China's Athlete of the Year on multiple occasions, a huge honor for a footballer. Ge Guangming. And finally, we must mention Ge Guangming, the dazzling, classic old-school winger of the early 80s who could give defenders twisted blood. A tricky customer on the flank, he loved to take players on, beat them with a shimmy, and get fans off their seats. He's fondly remembered as a true pioneer who took the brave step of moving to Germany in 1982 World Cup. Playing his club football for teams like Guangzhou Army, his impact was such that he was voted China's Athlete of the Year on multiple occasions, a huge honor for a footballer. Ge Guangming. And finally, we must mention Ge Guangming, the dazzling, classic old-school winger of the early 80s who could give defenders twisted blood. A tricky customer on the flank, he loved to take players on, beat them with a shimmy, and get fans off their seats.
Just as with the players, there was a big, expensive drive to bring in coaching expertise from overseas, especially during that CSL investment boom we talked about. The touchlines were subtly graced, if that's the right word, by some proper big names from the world of football management, names you'd see on the shortlist for any top European job. We're talking World Cup winners, Champions League winners, the full regalia. There was Marcello Lippi, the silver-haired Italian maestro who'd lifted the World Cup with Italy. He even had two rather eventful spells as the national team coach. Then you had Luis Felipe Scolari, another World Cup winner with Brazil, taking charge at Guangzhou Evergrande and adding to their trophy haul Fabio Capello. Stern and famously successful, he had a go Sven-Göran Eriksson, the unflappable Swede who'd managed England. He sampled the CSL's life at a couple of clubs. And Jose Antonio Camacho, the fiery Spaniard, he also took the reins of the national team for a period. The Chinese government, it appears, actively sought to recruit these high-caliber foreign coaches in the tomb the ends, with the grand hope they'd help reform the very institutions and infrastructure of Chinese football. And these weren't just token appointments for a nice photo opportunity. They were clear attempts to inject world-class knowledge and experience into the system, but as any seasoned football watcher will tell you, and as we've seen before in this story, it wasn't always a recipe for lasting success, was it? These foreign coaches, despite their shiny track records and their often eye-watering salaries, ran into a fair few cultural speed bumps and systemic brick walls. They faced significant acculturation challenges due to cultural conflicts and differing training norms, different ways of doing things, unfamiliar social environments, and sometimes a rather limited support network. It all made life a bit tricky, a bit lost in translation, you might say. And while you might think language would be the biggest hurdle, a more fundamental issue, as reports often suggested, was the sheer difficulty in effectively tracking and evaluating the enormous numbers of youth players within the vast Chinese system. It was a scale and a setup they weren't always equipped for, like trying to count grains of sand on a very large and not particularly well-organized beach. Then, of course, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and restrictions came in, many of the European coaches packed their designer luggage and headed for home, which just sort of underlined the often transient nature of their involvement.
So, what you had was a clear and very expensive attempt to bring in top-tier coaching talent. The strategy of importing high-cost foreign players and coaches was a shortcut to perceived quality, aiming to elevate the league and inspire local talent. However, the impact was often fleeting.
The challenges faced by these coaches, including those acculturation difficulties and an inability to truly get to grips with the youth structures coupled with their eventual departures, indicate that simply bringing in external talent is insufficient. The rapid imposition of restrictions and the eventual departure of these foreign elements exposed a fundamental failure. The imported expertise did not sufficiently embed itself or transfer knowledge to create sustainable domestic improvement. The focus, perhaps inevitably given the money involved, often seemed to be on short-term performance boosts over long-term structural change. This meant that foreign influence provided only a temporary boost rather than catalyzing any deep-seated, lasting development. It just goes to show, doesn't it, that without a robust local coaching education system and a supportive cultural environment that facilitates genuine knowledge transfer and adaptation, the impact of even the most famous foreign coaches remains limited and temporary. You need to build your own sustainable system from the ground up, not just keep relying on expensive temporary fixes from outside, hoping a bit of stardust will magically sort everything out. It rarely does.
When you look over the garden fence at how countries like Japan and South Korea have built their football, it does throw China's struggles into rather sharp and occasionally quite embarrassing relief. Japan, for instance, they've got a rather distinct philosophy, all centered on community integration and a really comprehensive approach to youth development. Sounds suspiciously sensible, doesn't it? Their J-League, established way back in 1993, deliberately prioritized a community-based football model. Clubs were required to adopt region nickname naming formats, like Yokohama Seagulls or Osaka Cherry Blossoms, rather than Megacorp Global Holdings FC. They eschewed corporate sponsorships in club names, all to foster a strong sense of local identity and belonging. Imagine that, a club actually belonging to its town. Stadiums are viewed as hometowns belonging to the people, and clubs actively engage in extensive community activities, deepening their ties with local residents. Proper old-fashioned stuff, that. And their youth development. Well, they employ a dual-track youth development system that is widely regarded as exemplary, combining club youth training with school football. Clever, eh? This integrated approach provides a safety net for players if professional football careers do not mutations or injuries, and let's face it, most don't. Players can still pursue regular jobs based on their educational qualifications. This tends to reassure parents, funnily enough, and encourages participation. Japan's youth training is meticulously structured into 5 distinct stages, from little tackers aged 8 right up to your 21 plus hopefuls, with each phase focusing on specific developmental aspects, emphasizing enjoyment, fundamental techniques, and mental fortitude for young children. The priority is accuracy over power. Learn to pass it to your own teammate before you try to welly it into rosy revolutionary. The J-League's establishment itself was a long-term strategic effort aimed at increasing Japan's FIFA World Cup qualification chances, a goal they successfully achieved in 1998. Their strategy is rooted in consistent, community-based expansion rather than sudden, panicked, short-term gains. Someone was clearly thinking long-term. Then there's South Korea. Their K-League, founded way back in 1983, gradually professionalized in 1996. A significant boost to its popularity came with a decentralization policy announced in 1996, following the country's confirmation as a co-host for the 2002 FIFA World Cup. Funny how a big tournament can focus the mind, The K-League actively promotes youth development through various programs such as the FC Futures project. This initiative offers online football manuals, presumably not written in impenetrable jargon, organizes children's football classes that visit schools and host football festivals, all aimed at providing an educational, cultural, and environmental foundation for children to enjoy and learn football.
The K-League is renowned for its youth development program, which has consistently produced numerous talented players who have gone on to represent the national team and the fans. Well, they actually turn up. The league boasts high fan attendance, among the highest in Asia, with an average of over 10,000 spectators per game, indicating a strong and engaged fan base. 10,000. Some CSL clubs would dream of that on a good day with a 2-for-1 ticket offer. So what are the big takeaways when you put these models next to China's rather more erratic approach? The contrasting trajectories of Chinese, Japanese, and South Korean football highlight fundamental differences in their development philosophies. Japan and South Korea, despite facing their own challenges. It's never all plain sailing, is it? Have achieved sustained success. Their models emphasize deep community integration, fostering a sense of local identity and belonging for clubs. Their youth development systems are often dual-track, valuing education alongside sport, which, as we've noted, keeps parents on board and broadens the talent pool. And critically, these nations have built stable financial models, with the J-League avoiding those daft corporate names in favor of community ties, and the K-League experiencing steady, organic growth. No boom and bust, just sensible progress. This stands in stark and frankly rather unflattering contrast to China's approach, which has been characterized by top-down, politically driven mandates and wildly ambitious targets that often seem plucked from thin air. The Chinese model, as we've lamented, relied heavily on massive, unsustainable financial injections from volatile sectors like real estate, creating an artificial boom that ultimately collapsed. Furthermore, China's youth system frequently conflicts with prevailing societal values that prioritize academic success, leading to a constricted talent pipeline. The key takeaway, if you haven't nodded off already, is that sustainable footballing power. The kind that lasts. The kind that builds proper foundations is usually built from the bottom up. It grows through cultural embedding, balanced development pathways, and stable, diversified financial ecosystems. It's not something that can be imposed from the top down through sheer capital or political will, however loud the pronouncements. The challenges observed in China's lower leagues are a direct consequence of this fundamental difference in development philosophy. It's not rocket science, is it? Just football sense, which, as we all know, isn't always that common. Well, after all that, after wading through the dreams, the disasters, the dodgy dealings, and the occasional dazzling display, where does it leave Chinese football? Its current status as a bit of a lower league's football power is a direct consequence of a complex interplay of deep-seated challenges. You've got that pervasive corruption that erodes trust and integrity. There's an underdeveloped and conflicted youth system that struggles to produce talent. Then there's an unsustainable financial model built on speculative investment rather than organic growth, and wrapped around all of that are socio-cultural barriers that deter widespread participation. These aren't just surface scratches. Mind you, the kind you can buff out with a bit of polish and a new 5-year plan. Oh no. These are fundamental structural and cultural impediments that have consistently undermined China's grand footballing ambitions. And there's often a but, if you look hard enough, usually found hiding in the small print of a new directive. Recent reforms indicate a growing recognition of these past mistakes. The inauguration of the Chinese Professional Football League in January 2025 represents a significant step towards separating management and operation from the CFA, with aims for greater revenue generation, fairness, transparency, and efficiency. We'll see. We've heard that tune before. There is also a renewed emphasis on youth development, including integrating football into school curriculums and investing in local infrastructure. The rebranding and reinforcement of Chinese youth elite leagues and a reported boom in youth-to-one participation suggest a shift in focus, and efforts to tackle corruption continue with a stringent approach. With numerous officials and players receiving bans and criminal penalties, increased expenditure on youth football has also reportedly led to higher participation levels. So, a few green shoots perhaps in a field that's seen its share of barren spells. However, if real lasting change is going to happen, the kind that actually sticks, it needs more than just new initiatives. And another round of glossy brochures. True transformation necessitates a fundamental shift from an imposed model driven by state-mandated ambition and external capital to an organic ecosystem. That means football needs to be properly woven into the fabric of society, like a comfortable old jumper, not an ill-fitting suit. It needs to be financially self-sustaining, standing on its own 2 feet, and governed with genuine transparency and accountability. Easier said than done. So what's the prescription from the learned doctors of football for this long and winding road ahead? Well, the path forward for Chinese football must focus on a few key things, common sense really, but often the hardest to achieve. Grassroots and youth development. Prioritizing broad participation over a narrow elite focus is paramount. This involves aligning football development with the education system to create viable and attractive pathways for young players, ensuring that pursuing football does not come at the expense of academic prospects. And absolutely crucial is sustained investment in high quality, well-compensated grassroots coaching to nurture talent effectively from a young age. Because those are the folks nurturing the talent from day one, often for little more than a pat on the back and a soggy orange at halftime.
For a better future, establishing genuine separation of powers within football administration is critical to fostering transparency and accountability. This will enable more effective combat against corruption, hopefully rebuilding public trust and ensuring fair competition at all levels of the game, from the schoolyard to the Super League. Financially, clubs must diversify their revenue streams beyond volatile external investment. Encourage an organic growth through robust fan engagement, merchandise sales, the kind people actually want to buy, and balanced sponsorship deals. This will create a more resilient financial foundation, less susceptible to those nasty external economic shocks that send everyone scrambling. A cultural shift is required. Promoting football's broader community building, mental and physical health benefits is vital to shift societal perceptions. This will help integrate football more deeply into daily life, making it a more attractive and culturally valued pursuit for young people and their families. Not just a way to win medals or make a quick buck, but something that's part of the community, part of life. Remember what Coach Lai Peng said, a man who's seen it from both sides. The revival of Chinese football will take hard work, generation by generation. There are no shortcuts on this journey, no magic bullet, no overnight fixes, despite what some of the more optimistic 5-year plans might suggest.
This long road to rejuvenation demands patience and consistent commitment to foundational reforms rather than chasing immediate glory. Only when that whole football ecosystem is healthy, particularly at its lower tiers and grassroots, can China truly aspire to rise as a world power in football. Only then might that dragon finally learn to consistently and convincingly find the back of the net on the world stage. Sleep well, dear listener. Dream of perfectly waded through bulls that split a stubborn defense. Dream of a billion hopeful youngsters kicking a ball on dusty pitches from Shanghai to Xinjiang. Dream of that one coach in a remote province with worn-out boots and a heart full of belief, unearthing a diamond in the rough. And remember, as you drift off into the quiet hum of the night, you never truly know where the next great footballing story, or even a nation's footballing renaissance, might begin. Because in the beautiful, unpredictable world of football, especially when a giant truly awakens, genius and passion can take the most surprising, and sometimes the longest, detours. Good night from lower leagues, and thank you for joining us on this very slow, very long, very meandering journey through the often frustrating, occasionally baffling but always fascinating world of Chinese football. We'll be back with another tale to help you drift off, another exploration of the game's forgotten corners, but until then, keep an eye on those developing leagues, those hopeful academies, wherever they may be. You never know where the next chapter of football history is quietly being written.